Mechanics is the study of the laws of motion of material bodies. Motion is change of position in time, but the concept of motion involves not only the concepts of space and time, but also the concept of what moves, and this need not, in general, be a material body. As in the motion of water itself, as opposed to the motion of the particles that make up the water. In this case, what moves is not matter, but a certain state of which we have affixed our attention to. The simplest material body is a material point. That is, a body whose spatial dimensions are vanishingly small compared to or with all the dimensions that play a part in its motion. A line of force cannot return into itself, but must either go off into infinity or end, or rather pause at a singular point. Mechanical energy consists of two parts: the kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion, and the potential energy, the energy of position. Their sum remains constant in all purely mechanical processes. There are no mechanical forces in nature, except those between material points. Every material point moves in response to the resultant of the forces which are exerted on it by all the remaining points of the omniverse. All active forces can be divided into internal and external forces. Internal forces are those which arise from points in or of the system. External forces are those which arise from points outside the system. Where the world ceases to be the scene of our personal hopes and wishes, where we face it as free beings, asking and observing, there we enter the realm of art and science. If what we see and sense is experience, is portrayed in the language of logic, we are engaged in science. If it is communicated through forms whose connections are not accessible to the conscious mind, but are recognized intuitively as meaningful, we are encouraged and engaged in art. Common to both is the loving devotion to that which transcends personal concerns and volitions. Forms as self-contained positive shapes that occupy space, mark positions and indicate direction, and are distinguishable in most cases from a background. A shape is an area easily defined with an outline. A shape that is given volume and thickness and that can exhibit different views becomes a form. A form that contains a recognizable subject is called a representational form. When it is not recognizable, it is considered non-representational or abstract. If the representational form can be found in nature, it is a natural form. Form is positive space, space that is occupied. Unoccupied space surrounding a form is known as negative space. Positive space is seen as a positive shape. When negative space is surrounded with positive shapes, it becomes a negative shape. With an outline, details can be introduced that provide descriptive information and strengthen the connections and divisions of elements. The apparent volume and depth and the spatial sequence from foreground to background of the form. An outline of a shape painted in black to create a continuous plane is a silhouette, the simplest expression of form. An organic shape displays convexities and concavities with softly flowing points of contact between curves. A geometric shape relies on a more mechanical means of construction. Sharpness and precision must prevail. Natural forms are more adapted to organic shapes, whereas man-made and abstract forms are more easily expressed as geometric shapes. An unbroken line that encloses space by separating the space it surrounds from the space surrounding it. Symmetrical shapes are regular shapes whose left and right halves and top and bottom are mirror images. An invisible straight line and axis divvies the shape equally. A form can be regarded as a three-dimensional plane that might bend, fold, or be seen from different angles and distances. When thickness is added to a form, it acquires volume. It can be rotated in space, displaying a different shape. It can also be made to appear transparent. Form possesses the same feature as color. It is tempered or animated by contact with another form. The science of design consists in creating relationships between straight lines and curves. The curve is to the straight line as the light or dark, warm or cold is to the domain of color. Cubists taught that to illuminate means to reveal. To color means to make more specific. They call that which strikes the mind brilliant, and that which the mind has to penetrate dark. The sensation of white is not necessarily associated with the idea of light, any more than black is with the notion of darkness. Any derivation from form is accompanied by a modification of color. Every modification of color gives light to a form. The uses of squared grids in composition to obtain proportions of form. The grid was used to assist the artist in achieving harmony and regularity in the proportions of their art. Egyptian artists drew human figures according to an established set of proportions obtained originally by a set of horizontal guidelines, and secondarily by the use of a squared grid. Not necessarily a system, but a means of simply transferring figures from a sketch to the wall. Whenever in painting a light meets a dark, an accent is obtained. Just as a contrast in tone creates an accent in a musical sequence. Perspective, for example, is a technique of ordering space formally and is determined by laws external to the individual. It requires certain kinds of positions, proportions, and a particular range of hue, warmth, and coolness. Perspective substitutes for intuition and sensation the mathematics of central projection.